Views and opinions of the following show do not reflect those of WSMN, its owners, and/or associates.
It's that time now to tune into Love Lessons with a Latina, where we talk about love, everything we love, and everything we confuse for love. And now your host, Jasmine Torres Allen. Good morning, Nashua. How are you doing today? You are listening to Love Lessons with a Latina with Jasmine on WSMN 95.3 FM, 1590 AM. Big shout out to our sponsor, Riviera Nayarit. If you are looking for an event space for a birthday party, I just had a wonderful birthday party with some of my friends over at Riviera Nayarit this past month, and it was a lot of fun. I had some amazing margaritas, especially... Yeah, and there was a mango rita that had the tagine on the rim, and it was so delicious. And I had my birria tacos, which were so good. So you got to check out Riviera Nayarit on 116 West Pearl Street here in Nashua. It's a Latina-owned restaurant. And if you're in Manchester, you can also check out their sister restaurant, Mi Jalisco. So you get a little bit of taste of everywhere here in Nashua and in Manchester. And a big shout out to the person who decorated my birthday in such a loving way.
Maciel Ideas.
Maciel Ideas and Events. She did such an amazing job. I kind of have a slight obsession with sunflowers, and it's kind of like my theme.
Is it ever?
Yeah, and she did a really good job decorating my birthday with a sunflower theme, and it really blew me away. I didn't expect it to be so amazing, but shout out to Maciel. If you're looking to have your events planned, or you want a beautiful backdrop for your birthday, or baby shower, she does the balloon arches. She does everything. Girl does everything.
Every holiday.
Every holiday. Even this past Valentine's Day, I saw she was doing some crazy things. Like, she is amazing.
Super
also
creative.
A Latina-owned business.
Let's go.
Yeah, and big shout out to Jeanette, or Beauty by Valdez. She gifted me these beautiful eyeshadow palettes for my birthday.
Which one did you get?
I got Atrevida, and I wore that on Valentine's Day this past week.
You know what? As a male, I'm not into makeup. I don't wear makeup myself, but there was something different about you. And that palette looked really well on you. So shout out to the Puerto Rican women.
Hey, Puerto Rican, yeah. So she check out her line, Beauty by Valdez. I felt really awesome. I'm not a big makeup person, if you know me. I'm more of a eyeliner, lipstick kind of girl, but very simple, kind of on the go all the time, and when I decided I wanted a little bit of like extra oomph for my day, I put on the Atrevida palette, and I was like, all right, I'm Atrevida out here, let's go.
You don't, and for all the ladies out there, you don't have to be a Latina to wear these palettes.
No,
because my wife, she be using some of the eyeshadow too.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Jeanette gifted her Atrevida as well, I believe.
Yeah, and she has like awesome, she has a couple of palettes that are really beautiful. Some a little more toned down, some with a little bit more, color to, that you can apply a little spice, right? So check her out. All these wonderful women entrepreneurs.
Let's go.
I like it. Big support. Big, keep doing your thing out there. You guys are doing amazing. And I'm seeing you guys all on my news feed. You guys are doing awesome. So keep kicking butt.
And Fabiola, thank you, Fabiola. Sapopan.
Yes, Sapopan. That's right.
Go.
Also, la otra dura. Like, that's right.
That's it.
All these female entrepreneurs. Let's go.
Let's go. So who do you have today and the guest?
Yeah, it's okay. So I have a repeat guest today, but I'm really happy to have him as a repeat guest because we had him on the phone for one of the shows, Christian White, from the creator of Listening to Learn series.
If anybody's tuned in and tapped in to his inner being, man, that's him.
Yeah, exactly.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
So I'm happy to have you back, on the show and in person now, right?
Absolutely.
Now we can really like chop it up.
We were just talking about how it would have been a totally different it was a beautiful conversation, but it would have been a different conversation.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like I always feel like in person is a different vibe, and it's hard to sometimes get a vibe over the phone, but with you, I don't know. I think it's pretty easy. I'm not gonna lie. But let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about parenthood first, because I wanted to talk about that because you're a big proponent on good fatherhood, good parenthood, right? And talking to your your kids, and we were talking a little bit in the office earlier, about how you're kind of like a laid back parent because you want your son to be able to experience it's okay. You want to be able to experience you want him to experience everything that life pretty much has to throw at him.
Absolutely.
And you want to be what I saw was like kind of like a guidance versus like trying to control his world.
Absolutely.
Can you speak a little on like what that looks like? Because I feel like some people are like, well, I want to protect my kid from the world, or I want to, and if I don't have control, then they could spiral out of control. You know what I mean? And what does it look like to be that parent that's more of a guide?
So I guess the way I kind of view it, and it stems from the way I was raised. And when I thought about ways that I wanted to, because I intentionally sat down and thought about how I wanted to raise Christian.
Right.
Because I was so restricted in so many ways. And I learned that the best way to accept life and to know it is to experience it. I'll step in for my son in any occasion where he is unsafe. And I'll never guide him towards something that I know could be unsafe. And there's no doubt when it comes to emotion, I mean, anything could happen at any time. I can't control that.
Right.
I want him to experience emotionally challenging times, mentally challenging times, physically challenging times, taekwondo, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. I want him to begin to, my goal is to have an open enough relationship with him where he allows me to help him process, or he uses me as the mirror to process those things.
That you're the go-to person.
That I'm the go-to person.
To be able to have those conversations.
And that applies to me, to his mom, to his grandma. It applies to family, people that we know love him like we love ourselves.
And that means building up your child's support system too.
Absolutely.
Right? And
absolutely.
I think that like there's a key part that you just said there, like you sat back and you thought about how you wanted to raise your son.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of the times we have kids and like we don't stop and think, how do I really want to raise my child? Because we're so, like sometimes we're in it and we're like, all right, we're about to have a baby, or we're maybe you're a foster parent, you're about to receive a child into your life, or
yes.
And sometimes we forget to sit back and say, all right, how do I want to raise this child? And who do I want in that support system as well?
Yes.
Because I feel like that's a key part of raising a healthy child. And it kind of leads me into this conversation of like the love within community, because we were just talking about that. Mm-hmm. And like building love within community.
Can I say something really quickly?
Yeah.
Shout out to all the women you mentioned that that were there for you when you needed it.
Yeah.
It's something that I talk about a lot, but the reason why things like that, the entrepreneurship, which is a way of motivational speaking to me, it's just they have a product doing it. What I love is that people from their communities get to see people that look like them, talk like them, think like them, may have experienced a lot of what they have experienced. They get to see somebody showing love in different ways for the sake of showing love. And it's important to name that.
Yeah.
Because it's a beautiful thing. Because one of the ways, it was so easy to hurt somebody else because they looked like me. So I assumed they took on exactly how I felt, which was worthless. But now you have somebody who's full of worth, who understands that worthlessness, coming back and showing another way. And that's loving in new ways. It's the evolution. Right. So I just wanted to point that out.
No, that's a great point, because we were talking about earlier in the office of like how sometimes we bond with people within our traumas, like we're both experiencing the same trauma at the same time, so we build a trauma bond and we build a relationship based off of that trauma bond. And then, then we grow, and some of us, go on
you
our
just
path
you
of
just flashed me back to something that wow.
Where
that trauma bonding is real.
It's real, and you build a relationship off of the trauma bond, and then when one of those people in that relationship grow from that trauma, sometimes, like, like we were talking about in the office earlier, which is like sometimes that person is still stuck in their trauma and they're trying to drag us back into, or like you said, they're using coping mechanisms, and sometimes they don't realize it. They're using coping mechanisms to bring you back to that trauma bond because that's the only way they know how to relate to you.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes
the
it's
only way they know how to relate to themselves.
Exactly, because they're still like in that in that trauma bond.
Yes.
So, and it goes back to that like community thing where you said like, all these wonderful women entrepreneurs that I mentioned, like they all have come from the bottom up. You know what I mean? They all come from my community. They all come from understanding what it's like to have $10 in your account. Or, some of them might have experienced homelessness at some point. You know what I mean? And, and to go back into their communities and say, hey, look, I got a little light here. Another woman entrepreneur right here. To go back into their communities and be a light and say, hey, like you maybe not even point out like you've got the trauma bond, but like you can get to this point as well. Let me help you get there.
It's about providing examples that we never had.
Right. And I call this, I learned this last night. For some reason, it came to me. I feel like we're in this time of like, I call it the great healing. You know what I mean? Where everybody is in the midst of like breaking their traumas and calling out their triggers and calling out their family members and relationships that never worked, and they're finally working through it. So I feel like there's a lot of people going through the great healing is what I'm calling it right now. I'm going to call it the great healing, and we're all trying to heal. And, it leads me into this conversation of love within the community, right? And you were telling me something amazing earlier. You were explaining to me about, you want to talk a little bit about the board, because I think that is absolutely beautiful. And I think it's the best way to disrupt the system.
Absolutely. So what she's referring to is I want to talk about how I came to just understanding the power in the back.
Sure.
Instead of just glaring.
Yeah.
And so, if anybody's on here who learned last time, I shared a little bit about how I experienced some, atrocities growing up for a very long time.
If you haven't listened to it, you can listen to it, on Love Lessons with Latina. It's still there.
Absolutely. I watched it last night. And what I realized is because everything I had gone through, I became just totally shut down. I lost my voice. I was determined to never speak up and out again. I would just accept. And so as I began to find my voice, I was very raw. I was very loud. I was very uncaring. I was very, well, you're going to have to just accept me for who I am,
aggressive.
the way I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Most people would be like, you're an aggressive young man. You know what I mean? Like
I was very passionate in the early learnings of my story.
Right.
Very passionate. And then as I began to develop more, I started talking differently. I started understanding others differently. I started listening better. I was using certain trigger words because I wanted to be as raw as possible with my experience. But I'm giving more people my experience, which is going to open up theirs, so I had to respect them. And what it eventually did for me was it showed me the quiet power. It showed me I don't have to scream and yell and dance and react. Yes, absolutely. I don't have to do that. And so about 3 years ago, I was invited to sit on a board called Essentials for Childhood, Massachusetts. And it's funded by the CDC, Center for Disease Control, and the money comes through an organization called the Children's Trust. And so what happened was at the time, somebody, and I wasn't there for these talks, but somebody said, look, we keep talking about the community, but we don't have anybody from the community here.
Which is a big thing in so many different aspects, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so Essentials for Childhood, it's for the safe, secure, stable, nurturing environments for children and families. They respond to usually children up to age 6, but now we are including families because it's been determined for the best outcome for the child, you got to have the best outcome for the parents or the caregivers or whoever.
Yeah.
You have to.
It starts with the parents, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I was invited onto this board as a parent advocate, as they called me at that time. And the EFC is made up about probably 40 people. There might be more than that because I'll talk about the subsidiaries or the collective impact teams. So what goes on is they've had a major role in the last maternity bill that was passed. Mm-hmm. And my role initially was basically to kind of just give advice and counsel. And so eventually I came onto the EFC leadership team. And from there, I could clearly see where I was having an influence. And I wasn't even trying to intentionally persuade everybody, because everybody that sits on the EFC is a disruptor of some sort within the profession they do.
Okay.
And the profession stem from DCF, Department of Children and Families, Department of Public Health. Literally every state agency you could think of in Boston, we probably have in the EFC.
Okay.
Which is a beautiful thing, because it's a great connection.
It's all together.
It's
now
all
we're all
together.
working cohesively.
Yes.
Yes.
So about 2 years ago, one of the EFC members came up with an idea of what we call a community governance board. And in essence, what this board would do is have final decision-making power within grant parameters on any initiatives the EFC puts out. It's not, we don't work with direct aid, direct resources.
Right.
And so what I love about the development of this is, for 2 years, the white population within the group, everybody was having affinity groups. Everybody was being open and honest about how certain things were triggering them. There was much more human in the room at this point. And we continued that. We talked about sitting in our discomfort, how I felt when someone says something, knowing how to call them out in a professional way.
And I'm sure there was a lot of white fragility in the room.
And all of it was admitted by each individual. So this is the beautiful thing of it. These are people who are already connected to certain systems, already connected. And their willingness to cede their power to people they don't even know is a big deal. It's game changing.
Right. So
it was I was nominated to be lead recruiter. Well, I was the sole recruiter. So I recruited 8 people throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 2 from Suffolk County, 2 from Springfield County, and that would cover Berkshire, all of those
areas.
I would love for the budget to have
to include more
50 community board members. Cape and Islands, the area of Plymouth, 1 in Lynn, 1 in Middlesex. And so we met for orientation last week, and it was an interesting task pulling this board together. So a week prior, and I just want to say this because I acknowledge it anytime I talk about the board now. A week prior to the first orientation we had scheduled, a woman by the name of Deborah Dickerson, who was an educator for 30 plus years, and my connection to her was she was a teacher at Concord State Prison for about 12 years. She died in her sleep the week prior to orientation.
Oh my God, I'm sorry to hear that.
Great friend.
Yeah.
She would have had an amazing impact.
Right.
An amazing impact. Her value is invaluable, no doubt about it. And so I was able to recruit someone else. So we met for orientation, and the individuals that I recruited, I knew 6 of them, and one I met recently. And all have the most amazing stories and the ways that they responded to those stories within their own worlds. And so this board comes together, and we talk about, first of all, just our lives. We understood we want to build group cohesion on a different kind of level, because we're going to be taking on a heavy task.
Right.
And so what Jasmine's referring to in terms of why this topic is important is we were talking about how love is expressed through through intentionally offering opportunities to the people we love,
Right.
even people we don't love, because we know they might play a role that eventually magnifies the love.
Exactly.
So, I think you're absolutely right. It's such an important thing to do when you're supporting family and friends, when you're given opportunity. This is a paid opportunity. They get $35 an hour
Which
each
is
time
huge
we meet.
to me, because
it's huge because
I think about all the times that like people in
your
our
mind
community
is worth everything.
Yeah, people in our community all the time are undermined and never paid for their direct knowledge of the community that they have and for the experiences that they bring to the table. And now, like, that type of building, that type of board where they are monetarily compensated and there's an intention to do better within the community because they have direct experiences from the community. And I have a really wonderful friend named Leslie Rivera, and she said, she used to say something like, some of the best community workers are indigenous to their communities. And that is so key, because a lot of the times what happens is organizations come in and they're like, well, you don't have a degree, you don't have a master's in this, and you don't have a bachelor's in that, and so we can't pay you this, but we can make you a community worker, and you can work for $15 an hour. You know what I mean? And or $17 an hour.
Yep.
And
Jazz, are you speaking from experience?
Oh hell yeah, I'm speaking from experience.
That's why I was letting her go.
Yeah, but I've seen that.
Sounds like a conversation I just had.
But I've seen wonderful community workers who dedicate themselves to their community and give nothing but love and expect nothing in return, because they see the power of love within their community. And so they just give and give. And sometimes these organizations are like, well, I'm just going to take. And I'm going to take it. And you never got that master's degree? Sorry. But this person outside of the state came in and they have a master's degree in this. And so we're going to put them in this position. They're going to be your supervisor. And I know I have direct experience with that, because that's exactly what happens. And that's why I'm so impressed by the fact that you chose people who have direct connections to their communities, who have life experiences, and then they're going to be compensated correctly
and have decision-making power.
Exactly.
Direct from the community, direct to the power.
Exactly.
Having as the conduits all the people who work for these state departments.
Right.
That's the key piece.
And tell people exactly what you told me, because you were like, well, we're going to disrupt it by following the rules but not really following the rules.
In a sense it was an eye-opener, because we're from such a similar place that we tended to respond to certain major disruptions similarly. And it showed itself, like, for instance, And I'll just paraphrase, because I don't want to talk too much about what we talk about in the board. Yeah. Not just yet anyway. But we spoke about how we talked about statistics, data, what this could do, what this means, what is it for. And we all kind of took the position of, it's used to harm us. Why are you telling this? It's only validating what we already know. We see it every day.
That data.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so we decided that we have to be intentional with everything we do, especially when it comes to understanding the systems and how they work. Because when we run up against the red tape, the bureaucracy, I typically revert back to, F the system.
Yes, which is our typical norm.
Yes.
Which is like, we get to the red tape and they're like, no. And then we're like, well, F this.
And the reality
and
is,
then we get discouraged.
If I do that, if we do that, if they do that, you're only going into the fight half complete.
Right.
And we probably went into many fights half complete.
And then, that we'll get the people that are like, oh, well, they just have a chip on their shoulder. Or, you know what I mean? They have the aggression. Yes. And what happens often is, like, they'll be like, oh, well, they just don't know how to speak professionally. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Jasmine.
Or
go in,
put us in
Jasmine.
positions of, like, well, they don't know how to act professionally, so we're not going to include them in this conversation anymore.
Lacking professional maturity.
Yes, and that's usually what happens. And so I'm a big proponent, and I've had conversations with nonprofits who will be like, Jasmine, can you come and talk to us about community work and things like that? And I'm always happy to put my input in.
Yeah, we need your input.
Yes,
we need to reach out to your community. I feel like we talk about this all the time. And I feel like the bigger that we're starting to grow, in the most humblest way, where our outreach is growing and growing and growing, the more they feel like they need to include us in something, instead of just saying, hey, why don't we support you in whatever you're doing?
Right, because you guys already know what's going on in the community
and how to approach your own community.
People.
Some way, it's kind of like that politician that shows up for the photo op.
Oh, we talk about that all the time.
Can you put I'm gonna give you I'm gonna donate 10 pizzas. Donate 10 pizzas, not buy them out of my pocket, but donate 10 pizzas. Can I put my logo on your flyer?
Yeah,
it's
take this picture.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. And I think the part that kind of troubles me is that a lot of these larger organizations who really do fit into the nonprofit industrial complex, there's an understanding because of the way things work. You're intentionally burning people out on purpose,
right,
without compensating them.
And then they don't also provide them the space to be able to learn, because I always say, like,
no, because you think they're going to put you in a position to take over their job.
Exactly.
It doesn't work that way.
That's exactly where I was going to go with that, because what ends up happening, I find, in my personal experience in nonprofit work, is I see these amazing community workers who don't get compensated the way they should be, and then they're like, well, can you pay for my tuition so I can get the education that I need, or can you send me to this class so I can have the tools for whatever I need? And then they're like, well, it's not really in the budget, or we can't really provide tuition assistance for you to get your master's in whatever, or your bachelor's in whatever.
Absolutely.
And I talk to nonprofits like this all the time, is that take the people that you already have who have direct connections to the community, who live and breathe and walk on the same streets as the people that they serve, and put them in positions of power, and then fund their education.
Yet what we have to remember is, if we have the power that you're talking, then they're unsure about the world they're living in.
Right, because they've already got the master's
degree.
already
know we
have.
don't think like they do. That's why they need us. So if we get into the role they're in, they know it's no longer the organization that they had.
Right.
It's going to be something different.
It changes the culture.
Probably something different, more along the lines of solutions than Band-Aids. The Band-Aids are profitable.
That's right.
And we're built around Band-Aids.
Yeah.
So when you're coming with solutions, they want to attach to it and maybe try to reframe it as their own.
As a Band-Aid.
Yet, they're not going to put somebody solution-oriented in power.
Right, because then we would lose funding.
Absolutely.
We would lose funding if there was a solution for it.
Eventually, what would happen is, it's economist, I think his name was like Joseph Schumpeter or something, like had this theory of creative destruction. And once these organizations are exposed for what they really do, which is nothing but more so harm to most communities than not. Because of the dependency patterns they set in individuals from early ages. You can be okay as long as you come to us for the medicine.
Oh, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it does start from an early age, because then you're like, well, we've got all of these things to keep you out of trouble. So you have to keep coming to us to stay out of trouble.
And your community is going to continue to have the same circumstances that push you towards us. Because the problem becomes is everybody want to hold the individual accountable. That boy just did that. That girl just did that. Look where they're from. We need to punish them. Fine. I'm willing to learn my lesson, but I can't be the only one learning in that moment.
Right.
We got to have some accountability across the board here.
Across the board.
Because if you just continue to punish the lower parts in their minds of society, it's the trickle down. Everybody's going to follow suit, and will continue to be the people looked at as the undesirables.
Ooh, dropping some gems, Christian. You know, we were talking about how like sometimes what we say can trigger other people. That triggered me a little bit. Could you tell? Like I was like, that triggered me a little bit because I think about. Like
I clearly remember Oscar saying, "Go in, Jazz."
No,
hey, don't put this on me. I clearly remember that.
No, but I think about it because, like, you know, I tell people all the time, like, I was in nonprofit work for a while, and I think I even remember when we first like added each other on social media, and you had posted something about like how nonprofits don't work, and I was in the middle of working for a nonprofit, and I remember commenting and saying not all nonprofits are bad, and I was like, I remember going after you for it, but it was because I had been triggered, and then it wasn't until like I really got into the like deep in my nonprofit work, and I realized like all these wonderful community workers who just gave and give and give and still give, and all for the love of their community, all for the love of like...
Yeah, and let's be clear. Some of these people that are given are single parents, still working 2 jobs, still...
They're doing side hustles because they can't afford to do what they're doing.
To the point the nonprofits will make you feel like you're a crappy person if you don't show up when they need you.
Yes, and when they burn you out...
Yes.
They put the blame on you because you've taken on too much.
This is why your community will always be the same.
Right.
Because you couldn't last.
Exactly.
You couldn't endure. You couldn't be consistent. And it's like, you know what? Like at this point, we need some different kind of organizations.
Yeah, exactly. And that, well, I always say, I'm like, I mean, we talk about this all the time, is that sometimes when we're, you know, people of color and you know, Latinos and stuff like that, we're from the BIPOC community and we're doing something amazing, and someone approaches us and they're like, well, have you thought about being a nonprofit?
You know how many? I was actually going to become one when I started the One Day at a Time, Dad.
Yeah.
Because that was what my circle was made up of when I was being introduced into like politics in certain rooms. Yeah. And so, but it always sat uncomfortably with me. Mostly because I knew they had no real experience of what was going on.
Right.
They could have somebody connected to it directly, indirectly, but all of their information was 4/5, 6th hand.
Why, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Why did you choose not to become a nonprofit?
Because it would have restricted me. It would have been shackling myself.
And that's what a lot of people know.
If I'm begging somebody for a grant to do something and I have to stick within the parameters of doing that, it puts me in the position of I'm a freelance thinker. I do what I want. It just so happens it benefits a lot of people.
Exactly.
Mostly myself, because this is my healing journey. You're just watching it in real time.
Yes, exactly.
That's my whole spiel.
Yeah.
That's what's going on.
You're speaking our language, my brother.
Yes.
Yeah. Listen.
So it would have been restricting, mostly restricting.
Right.
And I didn't want to be in a position where my creative ideas were dumbed down to become Band-Aids. Because I knew I had solutions.
Right.
I knew I had solutions.
For us, it was like...
It was the same thing.
For us, it was the same thing. And not only that, but just coming forward and saying, hey, why don't you become a nonprofit? Because I want to tell you how much you're worth. Instead of you coming to the table and saying how much you're worth. Setting that standard.
Yeah, setting a standard.
And also... remember, these are people who were stuck in their patterns, so their first gut reaction is to say, you should become a nonprofit.
Right.
They don't even know they're pulling you in that direction. Right. It's just natural for them to do.
Exactly. And that's it. And I say this to people all the time, like, you don't have to give up your services for free.
I always
you don't have
tell
to
people
give your services for free. You don't have to give your knowledge for free. And some people are like, well, it's for a good cause, and I'm all for that. Like I can't tell you how many conversations I've been a part of because of my heart like doesn't allow me to be like, well, it costs this, you know what I mean, to have me. But like at the same time, you know, it's almost like that we're punished for like not wanting to help our community for free, when in reality we want to be like you said, a lot of us are single parents, you know, we have families to take care of, families to feed.
I wonder if there's a study done where they can measure how much the wealth gap remains the same because of volunteering of BIPOC people within organizations.
Oh, 100%. Like
that would be, I mean, I don't know if there's ever been a study done like that of how many hours were worked, served, whatever, and what that would have been at the rate of minimum wage or whatever, however they would calculate it. But how much time and energy, because we remember when we're working for these organizations as well, they're having an influence on how we think.
Right.
And a lot of the stuff we may believe in, but we always have within us that feeling of, why am I not being paid for this?
Right.
And we're creating a pattern in ourselves and giving that back to the community while we're trying to do the work. So we end up becoming a conduit of bringing people on board to do the work we know we don't even want to be doing.
Oh my God.
Like, we got to break the cycle.
Yes, exactly it. That is, it's literally a vicious cycle. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with community workers, nonprofit workers who are like, Jasmine, I have to go to the food pantry myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And like, and they have to figure out how to set up that family that they're working with to go to the food pantry too. You know what I mean? Like,
and that's where and when I was in that position working for a nonprofit, I just had a boundary violation. F it, we'll go to the market together. Like,
exactly.
I'll pick you up. So
yeah.
you know,
I have to go pick up food for myself, so I'll take you with me.
Yeah,
exactly.
we can just go together.
Exactly.
I'll never forget. And this is one of the main reasons why I quit the organization. So I was working for an organization as a therapeutic mentor, and it was Christmas time. They literally had a room the size of, I don't even know, huge, the empty space in that that construction building across the street. Mm-hmm. Every gift imaginable, gift cards, razors, radios, anything you can think of for the kids that we serve and the young people we serve. And I remember I asked my boss, I said, I got to be honest. I'm not doing too good. I can't really give Christian what I want. I have to put it towards other things. Because first of all, we were getting paid. We worked with insurance. We build units, and that's the worst job to have is trying to come up with units yourself in a pandemic.
Right.
With kids that you can only reach if you go to their neighborhood.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Go where they're at.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so she said to me, she's like, I'm sorry you can't. I'm like, I'm asking you for two $25 Stop and Shop gift cards of the thousands that are there. Where does where does the company come in that sense to support the people who have to support the people that continue to bring them business? So if you can't do that, this is not solution-oriented. No. It's Band-Aid oriented.
Exactly.
And the crazy thing is, you know my finances because you know exactly what I get paid. Mm-hmm. You know exactly how hard things are. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's like a big part of this is just getting trapped in them. So many people will get into a position and be okay themselves. And at that point, assimilation just takes full effect.
Oh, 100%.
It just takes, it's amazing.
You drink the Kool-Aid hard because you're like, I believe in the mission, I believe in this, and I believe in that. And then you realize I'm losing myself.
You go to being a voice for the people you care about to being a mouthpiece for the upper-ups who have zero understanding.
The token is what I say.
Absolutely.
The token. And I've been in that position before where people because they'll look at me, I'm a white passing Latina, right? And I speak Spanish, and they'll be like, dang, you speak Spanish? Okay. And I'm palatable enough and I speak well enough where they put me in positions to talk to those higher ups. Of course. And still be able to know how to talk to my own people and in the languages that they understand.
You're less threatening.
Yes, exactly. I'm more approachable, more palatable.
And in their mind, that means they think you're worthy of being groomed to be turned into robots of them.
Boom. Oh.
The undesirable ones, we just need to find a way to keep them emotional and spending.
Drop one of Clue's bombs for him.
Oh wow, this is an amazing conversation. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Love Lessons with Latina with Jasmine on 95.3 FM WSMN, produced by First Gen Multimedia. with Christian White, my host. I'm so glad you're here because this is great conversation.
Yes.
All right, let's shift the topic a little bit. We're gonna talk about relationships.
Okay.
The both of us have experienced, sexual abuse in our lives, and what it's like to pursue relationships, even having the trauma of sexual abuse. You know what I mean? And what it's like, because I talk about this all the time on my show, which is like things we talk about love and things we confuse for love, right? Mm-hmm. Things we confuse for love because we were trying to figure out what our version of love is because we weren't taught the love that we wanted. You know what I mean? And so, can you?
And then there are some who are instilled so young, they get taught a particular way of expression of what that person thought that was love, that they take it on as their own, and they begin to want that for themselves. So It's indistinguishable in any confusion. There's no confusion.
Right.
They want that.
They want that because it's all they were exposed
to. All they know.
Yeah. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, is like, I watched my parents' marriage and I learned a lot of what I thought was love I had to undo as an adult. And it sucked because it was a process, and it was a learning process because I had to mess up in a lot of my relationships in order to find my footing in what I thought was healthy.
I love that you use the word adult.
Yeah.
Because for me personally, that implies you understood that you now had the developmental skills and understandings of yourself to address something. Because as a child, you just don't have that.
No.
You don't have that.
And sometimes it's taken from you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we talked about this in the previous show of like how that power was taken from us when we were young. And then, you use this reference the last show, which was like a radio, and fine tuning, like trying to find the dials of like what sounds right, what doesn't sound right. And I love that analogy because that's exactly what I've had to go through for like a lot of my relationships. And one thing that I wanted to bring up was, the thing that we tend to do, which is because we're so relatable to people, that when we get into a relationship, we tend to absorb the other person's personality.
I tend to call it immersing.
Yes,
I
exactly.
give up. I willingly give up parts of myself in favor of connecting, anticipating needs, anticipating their desires. Mm-hmm. And a part of it is because I want them to accept me.
Right. And that's a huge part to like even admit too, right? Because you want your partner to accept you for who you are, but then you realize that you're slowly losing who you are because you're trying to have them accept you for all the things that they
Absolutely.
like.
And a part of the reason why you and I do that is because of the way we felt, understood, and interpreted our abuse. We're classic fawners is what the word would
that's
be.
The word. That's the fawning.
We're classic fawners, people pleasing. We didn't have any control, so the best thing we can do is try to be ready, available with a happy face for the person coming to abuse us.
That's exactly it. Because
so
you shut down. Like it's not even shut down. It's more of a disassociation.
Absolutely.
That happens, and like you're just like, well, we got to do this, and it's a survival tactic.
Absolutely.
And it's something that you pick up and then you take into your relationships, and it's not just like romantic relationships. You can do that within your friendships as well.
I posted something. You can trauma bond with your kid.
Yeah.
You can trauma bond with your grandmama. you can trauma bond with your dead friend.
Yes, that's
you can
right.
trauma bond in any relationship. And that just means for that individual, they're going to have to at some point first become aware and begin to look within. Like me, when it came to my last relationship, it was very devastatingly painful, so many different things, mostly because I was triggered back to a time where I felt helpless. And I saw that I wanted to adapt that way because I was presently in that feeling. But my body wouldn't let me. The red flags worked this time. And I was doing every single thing I could to sabotage and hold it together because I was struggling with fighting myself, the part that wanted to adapt how I always did, and then the part of me that had grown a little bit and was like, we ain't staying in this one, man.
Yes.
And so it made me realize, so if I lined up every woman I ever dated seriously, even women that I just casually dated,
right,
they look so different physically, but they share similar traits of what I'm attracted. I'm attracted.
I have the same pattern, like in the sense of like they all look completely different from each other. But you're right. There's always that one trait that just for some reason I was attracted to.
And for me, it was many traits. And most of those traits, and in no way would I ever say any of them were abusers or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I am saying is some of the ways my abusers portrayed themselves and the things that I picked up on was like a perfume to me on these women. The traits that they possessed, which were similar in their world to my abusers, was like a beautiful perfume. It was like a love potion for me.
Because you revert back to a comfort zone.
I wanted to be validated by something outside of me. And I only learned this recently. Let's be clear.
Yeah,
this was recent.
This is recent.
So I had to sit down. I wrote out all the traits I felt like I was attracted to. And then I thought on all the relationships. And then I said to myself, I need to experience what it's like with a woman who has maybe the opposite of that trait and maybe some of those traits. Like it's a smorgasbord of things that are mixed together. But I know with these traits, I am going to continue to be a fawner. And that's taking power from myself.
And I think that's something that you said there, which is like you sat down and you wrote down the traits that you were attracted to. I don't think people do that on like a regular basis. You know what I mean? Like in the sense of like when they're single and ready to mingle, right? Like they're ready to put themselves out for dating again. They're just thinking they're thinking, oh, well, I like 6'5" person, or, like they always think of like everything else except for the personality traits that they might be attracted to, or, the values that someone might have, because, someone could have the different values from you. And I felt like in my own experience, I was always kind of attracted to, a man who knew exactly what he wanted. You know what I mean? Like there was no indecisiveness, and like, I'm sure there are a lot of women that could relate to that, where like they just
that's emotional security.
It's emotional security.
Men relate to that.
Yes, exactly.
Men relate to that. That's emotional security.
Right. Exactly.
That's a check. That's a major checkbox.
Yeah, exactly.
What you were lacking.
Exactly. And that's the key word there, is that it was something I knew I was lacking in, so I was searching for it in another partner. And what I came to realize for myself was like, I need to have that emotional security myself before I go searching for someone who has that.
I have to add in something to that.
Yeah.
And I'll bring it back to people, but you're not just looking for it in your partner. You're looking for it in Dunkin' Donuts, in the mall. You're looking for it when you pass by an advertisement. All of this plays a role on your self-soothing habits.
Oh,
your spending is in some ways directly tied to your personal styled self-soothing habits.
You're right. Yeah, I would agree.
And with the person, that's your self-soothing.
Yeah.
So what happens if somebody's impulsive in this case?
Like impulsive
purchases, or somebody that's just impulsive with money.
Well, I mean, and so let's be clear. We're keeping it in the realm of people who might have experienced trauma.
Yes.
Everyone doesn't do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'll say is you'll typically find they're the avoiders. They have to numb in many different ways constantly. They're the avoiders. There, it's so painful that the moment I'm triggered, I'm leaving that situation. Typically, the impulsiveness connects to the avoiding a situation emotionally.
I would have to agree 100%. And I'll even like call myself out. I'll call myself out because like I'm an impulsive, like I love to go out for breakfast. It's one of my favorite things to do. But it's a I know personally that it's a self-soothing technique, and I'm self-aware to say that it's a self-soothing technique, because I could be like dirt broke and still try to figure out how to go out to breakfast, because I know that in that moment it's a band-aid to self-soothe.
The addict's gonna find that hit. The addict is gonna find that hit.
Exactly.
And what I noticed it did for me. So one thing I want to say about people is the woman that turns me off the most is the woman that tries to immerse into me.
Ooh.
How interesting is that?
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
and
That's
you know what?
I respect that.
I can respect that too.
I
because
understand
I've seen a
So
lot of
I'm
women
looking.
do
I'm
that.
looking to intentionally immerse. But when someone's looking at me that way, when I'm the me, I'm disgusted by it.
And you know what? I'm gonna have to agree with that, because I've seen a lot of I've seen a lot of women who go into relationships and become their partners.
Yes.
You know, who become like especially if they're at least for my community, like sometimes they're gangbangers, and they become that lifestyle of their partner because they want to be with that person so bad that they become their partner and what they think their partner is looking for, and so they're constantly changing facets of themselves or their likes and their dislikes, or like even physical features sometimes to fit the person that the
image, the perception.
Yeah, that perception
Yes.
that they think that their partner
And
wants.
the interesting part of that is we end up experiencing the hell, because when everything hits the fan, we're exposed and we are clearly shown that we've been something else this whole time. So we don't even know how to respond, because so when I was trying to break away from the relationship,
we have everything in common.
No, yes, to a degree, because like I said, at this time, my body was still like, you gotta go. You gotta go. There's no way I'm letting up on this one.
Right.
You gotta go. Which I'm proud of, because I'm at a process where my body is strong enough to speak up for me. Right. My body was advocating for me. And I was and the inner me, the inner child, was trying to find a way to continue the trauma bond.
And and I talk about this all the time, is that like your emotions will physically manifest if you don't connect with them. If you don't connect with them, your emotions will literally physically manifest in your body.
And it manifests in every single thing you do, from the way you eat your food to combing your hair. It is expressed on every being that is you. And the interesting part is when we don't see those blind spots. Usually we see them when we get triggered into them. We have to remember our style of love is still being expressed through the blind spots that we're unaware of. So we don't even know if we're harming with our love. In another dimension, we're the people who harmed us. So becoming self-aware is so important.
Yes.
And part of that self-awareness is accepting that there's both light and dark in you, and you use people, you hurt people intentionally, unintentionally. Some people might think you're a POS, whatever the case may be. Yet you really have to delve in. Just like with the governance board, we have to delve into the other side. Otherwise, we're showing up halfway complete as a pattern.
Is that the reason why our communities are so tied into like the glim and glam, the shiny stuff, the cars, the houses, the perception of what our being's supposed to be and what we're tuned into?
Well, a part of me feels a lot of that stems from just the fact that we were told that there's a life that's attainable. We have very real restrictions in how we can attain that life. So if we can't express it fully in the sense of knowing all of the boundaries around financial issues, all of the things that come with that, then we're going to blow it by trying to show the next person, I made it, you didn't.
Wow.
Oof. All right.
Wow.
Damn, that was a drop of knowledge. Damn. I wish we had more time.
No, we're going to have him again.
Yeah.
He's going to be a regular.
Guys, thank you, Christian,
My pleasure.
for joining me on Love
And
Lessons
happy
with
birthday,
Latina.
Jasmine, by the way.
Hey, happy birthday, Jasmine. I heard it was your birthday, so happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Happy
Aquarius
birthday.
is all out there. I'm an Aquarius, too,
Let's
let's go.
go. Feliz cumpleaños.
Feliz cumpleaños, that's right. Thank you so much.
My
I
pleasure.
appreciate
My
you.
pleasure.
All right, big shout out to our sponsors, all of our Latina entrepreneurs, Rivera Nayarit, Mi Jalisco, Maciel, Jeanette, like we've got so many, even like House of Morgan, right? House of Morgan. All these beautiful, beautiful Latinas and women entrepreneurs putting it out there. Thank you so much. This was produced by First Gen Multimedia on WSMN 95.3 FM. See you next week.
WSMN 1590. WSMN 95.3 FM Nashua. Listen, watch, and stream at WSMN.live.
USA Radio News with John Hunt.
President Joe Biden said this morning he continues to believe Russian President Vladimir Putin will go through with an invasion of Ukraine within days. U.S. intelligence says at least 7,000 additional Russian troops have headed to the Ukrainian border. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
We've also seen a continued problematic, troubling buildup of troops at the border and surrounding Ukraine.
Biden continues to tell reporters the threat of an invasion is still extremely high. Applications for U.S. unemployment benefits rose last week by 23,000 to 248,000, according to the Labor Department. About 1.6 million Americans are still collecting jobless aid this week, and first-time applications for jobless aid, which generally track the pace of layoffs, are back down to